Welcome to the Downtown Den on this Friday afternoon, and we're absolutely delighted to be joined by Gillian Keegan. Gillian was elected as the first female MP, I understand, for Chichester back in 2017, and she is the Parliamentary Under-Secretary for Apprenticeships and Skills, which of course is what we'll be focusing on for much of the conversation today. A hugely important role given the situation that we're in, and of course will play an absolutely pivotal part in terms of our recovery in 2021 and beyond. But before we get into that, Gillian, and your role in terms of that particular important aspect of the economy, and as I say, economic growth in the future, I just wanted to get a little bit of history. For those who don't know, you may be the MP for Chichester, but your heart, I think I can safely say, is at least a little bit still in Merseyside. Is that right?
Yeah, not only my heart, my mum and dad, pretty much all my family. Yeah, everybody's in Huyton. So yeah, I grew up in Huyton in Knowsley. Yeah, from a massive, large Catholic Liverpudlian family, most of whom still there, most of whom of course live within 4 streets of one another. So yeah, I've gone, I think, probably one of the furthest away. A couple have gone abroad, but the vast majority of my aunts and uncles and cousins and my mum and dad still live in Huyton. So yeah, it's the mothership.
and you know, the question that everybody from Liverpool gets asked, red or blue? And I'm talking about football, not politics, obviously.
As I say to them all, it's red for football, blue for politics, but some of them got the wrong memo.
Right. Well, we've not got off to a great start there, me being an Evertonian, but we'll overlook that. And you probably made a more sensible choice, to be fair. Just in terms of the parliamentary move, prior to that, Gillian, what was your career? What were your background?
Oh, well, I've had a long business background. So I only got elected in 2017, so that's 3 years ago. I'm 52 now, and I started work at 16 as an apprentice myself in a car factory in Kirby. It was a subsidiary of General Motors, actually. So it was Delco Electronics, and they made all the sub-assemblies, the electronic sub-assemblies for Vauxhall and Opel cars. So I started there age 16, and I did my apprenticeship there. I worked there for coming up to about 8 years, and they also sponsored me all the way up to degree level. So I went 1 day a week started off at Kirby College, and then Liverpool John Moores. So I did my degree 1 day a week, and sometimes I had evening classes as well. And then, yeah, I worked there up until into the 90s. And then I got another job actually with NatWest Bank, and that was down in London. And that was a promotion. And then I became a senior buyer. So I'd kind of ended up in the commercial world after my apprenticeship. So I was a buyer of plastics and electronics for cars. And then I moved on from there to the bank, and then I became IT procurement manager for the bank. Ended up bizarrely going to Tokyo for a couple of years to basically get all the sort of things that we've got now, all the chips for the digital payments, you know, that didn't exist in the 90s, but we knew we needed to develop. So I ended up working on sort of new payment technology and digital payment technology. Did that for a couple of years. That ended up being rolled into MasterCard. So I worked there for a few years, and then ended up 8 years in Madrid. By this point, I'd kind of moved from procurement more into sales. So I ran up global sales for a company in Madrid. And I came back to the UK in 2010.
And the thing is, Gillian, given that array of experience in the commercial world, the criticism that's often levelled at MPs from right across the spectrum is perhaps a lack of understanding of what businesses on a day-to-day basis are having to go through in terms of challenges, in terms of coming up with, you know, just on not just a day-to-day, but looking forward in terms of what the future holds. And so I think people on the call today it'll be refreshing for them to hear someone who has got those experiences, real life experiences, and hopefully now can start to apply some of that into the new role that you found yourself in. And just ask you this question, really, and it's not meant to be a criticism of your colleagues, because I was a politician myself for a long time. So I know for a fact that I'm probably one of the few people who think members of Parliament don't get paid anywhere near enough. But nonetheless, do you find yourself sometimes having conversations where you do feel actually they don't quite get what's going on in the real world from time to time? Is this Westminster bubble something that actually exists, do you think?
I think, you know, within your lifetime, you only get one set of experiences. So I've got tons of business experience. I've got tons of experience, you know, going to a nosy comprehensive school, not many people left with any qualifications. I've got tons of life experience through that journey. What I don't have is much political experience. So all the experience I'm trying to get now is, you know, how do I get around this? You know, these are different organizations. How do I make the civil service work for me? How do I get to penetrate my message through these various layers? How do I get stuff done in politics? So they're my challenges. Obviously, if you've been a special advisor or if you've been working around politics for a long time, you probably have all of that in spades. But where you'll struggle is really understanding business and business pressure. So I think you've always there's very little crossover between business and politics, between the civil service and the sort of real world, as it were, in terms of business. There's very little crossover. People tend to stay in their little groups. So I think whatever you've done, you've always got a big other world to discover, which is the one you haven't been in. I mean, I love the way I did it because, first of all, I really, really enjoyed business. Secondly, I had to make money, and no one was ever going to sort of give me any, so I had to make money, and it seemed to me a safe way of trying to do that was in trying to get on in the business world, as opposed to the sort of very insecure world of politics in a way. So yeah, I basically, you know, did it that route, and I never thought of becoming an MP. Somebody actually suggested it to me. It wasn't, I guess you could say I was political, because being a Conservative from Knowsley does stand you out a little bit. You know, there weren't many, but you know, that's kind of as far as it went, really. So I guess you always need to find out what you don't know. I think what happens a lot is people don't really spend time finding out why somebody else is saying what they're saying, or why somebody else is coming up with a different answer, or why someone else is saying no. What constraints have they got? And I think whatever you do, you've always got to figure out, where's the other person coming from? Why? How can I sort of connect myself as well as possible to their objectives, and see if we can get some synergistic objectives as well. So I think that's probably how I'd answer that, because I'm lost in the world of the civil service. You know, I ask 1,000 questions a day, you know, which must seem very basic to them.
But in terms of just the parliamentary life that you've led for the last 3 years, I know the last 9 months, as for all of us, has been very different in terms of having to do lots of these things. But how did you find that transition from the business workplace into the political workplace of Parliament?
I mean, it's a completely different world. But, you know, again, you know, when I found myself aged 26 sat in a business meeting in a tower block in Tokyo, that seemed like quite a long way from Highton as well. So, you know, I've done a few things which have always been, I guess I've been nervous doing them, but, you know, the thing is, it always turns out better than you worry about anyway. The thing about politics is it's a much friendlier world than you think. So not only on your own side, I mean, obviously it is like a bit of a club, you know, the Conservative MPs and the Labour MPs, but I get on with loads of the Labour MPs as well. You know, there's actually more Scouse Conservative MPs than there are Scouse Labour MPs, which is quite not representing the place, but from the place. So actually that might have changed now, because there was a couple of new Scouse ones came in the last election. So that may have changed in 2019. But, you know, everyone gets on a lot better than you think. But of course, it's a different world. I mean, you know, to me, it was, I'll never forget when I took my mum and dad there for the first time, and my dad, he was like the weight of history, and he was overawed by the whole experience. And it's, we just think about the figures who've been in the House of Commons and what privilege it is to represent people in a place like the House of Commons, and think to yourself, how on earth did you get there? You know, which is always a nice feeling to have. But I would say on the whole, it's friendlier, it's more cooperative, and it's but it's still very traditional. But I quite like tradition. I like some of the pomp and ceremony of the UK, of the British traditions, of the, you know, the kind of, you know, the royal family. I love all of that. I think it's a great differentiator for our country. You know, no one else does it the same way, and I think it's something to be really proud of. So yeah, it feels very special. I'm very privileged to be in the position, but there's many friendly people, and actually the person who was the most friendly on the first day in, who really made a massive effort, was Nicholas Soames, who's Winston Churchill's grandson. And he was an absolute gentleman as a fellow West Sussex MP. And he was probably the person that made me less in awe of my colleagues than I probably would have been, because they have got many of them a very different background from me. You know, let's be honest, they are posher, some of them. So, you know, that sometimes you can be a bit overawed by that. But the fact that it was him that reached out you know, and to kind of help me, guide me through, made me feel a lot more comfortable.
Now, I'm aware of how these appointments for ministerial posts are made, but some people on the call won't be. 3 years in, that's still a relatively new member of Parliament. And it will have been less than that when you were approached to do the job that you've taken on now. And it's a hugely important job. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of it in a moment. But just tell people, I'm sure they'll be interested, how did that come about? What's the process in terms of the appointment to ministerial positions?
Well, it is a bit of a black art, because you don't know. I mean, ultimately, the Prime Minister and the Chief Whip choose. And the Prime Minister chooses the Cabinet, and the Prime Minister and the Chief Whip, but more the Chief Whip chooses the junior ones. So, I mean, there's a couple of things that you can't have done, which is, you know, vote against the government and everything and be a complete rebel. So one of the things is somebody that they think they can rely on. Then there was also, you know, obviously it was quite a chaotic time actually when I went, because we had the whole Brexit Parliament, we had the leadership competition in the Conservative Party, then we had the election. So there's been a lot of turmoil. Another way is, you know, to back the winner. So, you know, if you backed Boris as the leader, I didn't choose that way. So that wasn't open to me. And then I think another way is, you know, they do look at what they've got, and they do try to get quite a representative. They're very much trying, the Conservative Party, to get more representative, more women, more Northerners, more working class voices as well, and more business people as well. So they've been very much trying to get people who have that kind of background. So for me, I mean, I had a conversation, they said, you know, what kind of jobs? I said, well, look, obviously I could do business or anything to do with technology, despite the start here, or international business. You know, I've done lots of stuff there, but the one that I'd love to do, that would be the one I'd covet most, is the apprenticeships and skills job, because I honestly think I am the walking, talking, living, breathing. You will not get a better salesperson for apprenticeships, because my apprenticeship changed my life, and I just know the power of apprenticeships, and I completely believe in them, even from somebody who hired lots of people, in lots of places around the world, in lots of different roles. I just think apprenticeship is a brilliant model, almost for any career choice. So anyway, they obviously listened, and yeah, I was lucky. I got lucky, but you know, I am a bit differentiated because, you know, I have that long career, and I think I'm the first apprentice that has been the Apprenticeships and Skills Minister. So I'm able to say that on every call as well, which is quite good.
Yeah, and we'll get into the job now then, and as you say, you've a passion for it, which obviously helps. Just as an aside, you probably know this, but Steve Rotherham, who's the Metro Mayor,
yes, I do.
He was an apprentice. His career.
Yeah, he was a brickie.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, it's not a bad CV for the apprenticeship movement in one sense. But Gillian, just tell me, in terms of when you've looked at that agenda and what you'd like to do in this area, which is going to be crucially important as we move forward to 2021. First thing I'd like to say is I think probably around 2008, 2009, apprenticeships got a bit of a bad deal on the basis that I think the good intention was, let's just get people into apprenticeships. But then I don't think that there was enough in terms of ensuring that the right people were matched to the right businesses. And in some respects, by the way, businesses who were geared up to provide the necessary support for those young people coming in. And so I just felt that for a period of time, for a number of years actually, apprenticeships had a bit of a bad press. I think that's starting to change, but nonetheless, we still need to do a bit of work around that. So tell me what your sort of vision is in terms of the apprenticeships moving forward into 2021.
The first thing, and you put your finger on it there, is quality. It has to be an amazing quality experience. It has to basically give you some really key skills and knowledge within the sphere, whatever the job it is that you're doing, but also the technical skills, the qualifications that accompany that, and it has to have that quality in it. I was quite astonished when I looked, because, you know, if I think back, I did my apprenticeship 35 years ago, and, you know, if you left our school was a comprehensive school, Nosey St Augustine's, you know, nobody went off to university. That just wasn't a thing. So you were lucky if you got an apprenticeship. If not, you did like a YTS or just a normal kind of job and tried to work your way up from there. And the apprenticeships then, you know, my sister did one, my brother did one. Both my sisters and I were led to degrees. My brother's, he did a carpentry apprenticeship. So, you know, he then sort of was a qualified joiner, and then he went off, did other things after that. All of my cousins, everybody did apprenticeships, and they were all really good quality. You could get a good job with a good salary and move on from there, you know, career prospects as well. That's what they used to be. So I was quite amazed when I looked at some of those years where they had been, you know, and I think what happened is people were chasing quantity over quality. And, you know, you do get what you measure sometimes. So it was like, you know, big numbers, and, you know, you get the numbers, but something has to give. And I couldn't believe it, because, well, first of all, I thought, you know what, it'll be working class kids like me, wouldn't have a clue, would just completely trust that you were going to get a good experience that would be shoved aside with some lousy experience, or, you know, being able, I remember knocking on doors in 2015 when I stood in St Helens and seeing young kids, you know, at home, and I'd be like, what are you doing at home? You know, why aren't you working or studying? And they'd be like, oh, you know, I did an apprenticeship. It was terrible. It was really awful. It was like filling one form in. I wasn't learning anything. And, you know, and, you know, we cannot let young people down with their, you know, when they put their faith into an apprenticeship. So the number one thing is quality. The second thing is for them to be available at as many occupations as possible. The last one I signed off just last week was a space engineer, believe it or not, all the way up to all the levels. So they start at level 2, which is GCSE level equivalent, and they go up to master's levels. So degree, and you can even do your master's. Not MBAs, that was something that we took out of the program because it was going to be too expensive and take the money from the other end, but for masters in specific areas. Most of those are in health and in the health service. But, you know, that there's almost any job that you can get via a degree, you can get via an apprenticeship. And if anything, you can probably get more secure way into a career path using an apprenticeship, particularly the high level apprenticeships. So that's my vision, that they're very high quality. They're in every profession, every occupation. They start at the entry levels and they go up to the top levels. And people who start can progress as well. You don't just come in and you're one of these for life. You can progress as well using the apprenticeship system. It's open to all ages. So I think we've got the foundations of a very solid system. And we've just put all of the standards. We've put a new standard in place as well to make sure that they are of the right quality, working with leading employers to design the apprenticeships. And I think now the quality is something that is a lot better than those days. but we just need to build on that. The other thing is making sure everyone knows about them. I sometimes think they're the best kept secret in the whole country. I mean, sometimes I speak to young people and, you know, there'll be a group, a round table of apprentices, and quite a few of them will have been to university, and then they'll be doing a level 4 apprenticeship in digital marketing or HR or law or something, or accountancy. And they'll say, you know what, no one ever told me that I could have avoided all that debt and I could have done this. And they'll get me to qualified to be an accountant via this, without, you know, with a company paying, with me getting a job, with me earning as well. Nobody ever told me about it. So I think that's the other thing, to make sure. I mean, for some people, they want to go off to university, and, you know, both our boys went off to university. They couldn't wait to escape us. But, you know, and sometimes that's a driver, you know. But I just want to make sure that everybody knows about them, because they are, I believe, fantastic. And if I was doing it today, I would still do a degree apprenticeship, and I'd probably do a T level before that, on the way to my career.
What do you think we can do, Gillian, to improve the marketing and the awareness of apprenticeship opportunities? Because I think you're quite right. There's a lot of young people out there don't really know how they access those apprenticeships, and indeed, you know, whether or not they would be suitable candidates. I think often, you know, kids will leave school without qualifications and think, well, that's me done.
Yeah.
We need to find a way, don't we, of getting those messages out there.
Definitely. You know, and as you say, those kids who leave school without qualifications, which was about 90% of the kids in our school who had, you know, fewer than the 4 GCSEs or whatever you were supposed to get. You know, most of them didn't leave with that. Be lucky if they left with 1 or 2. Most left with nothing. And actually, there's 2 things. The first is, if that's happened, you know, you're not done, because your apprenticeship, they'll help you with your maths and English, which you need to pass your apprenticeship. But your level 2 apprenticeship, you can either do the GCSE again, or you can do functional skills. So, and that support is there to help. And it's in a better environment as well. You can do it in college, and you can do things that are more related to whatever profession you're studying. But also, there's a lot of people I've met, and this is what I love about apprenticeships, who have got to be, you know, in their 40s or 50s. They left school with no GCSEs. I was talking to a fella not long ago called Andy, and he's my favourite story, because he works for an ambulance service, and he said he'd worked like insecure, low-paid jobs all his life, from cleaning. He was a toilet cleaner in a nightclub. He had 3 different jobs, like trying to keep everything going, and, you know, sometimes he'd lose one, etc. And he did that for years, from school for years. He was now in his 40s. He was on his level 4. He'd started level 2, and he's now on his level 4, on his way to becoming a paramedic. And, you know, he said, it's changed my life. It's changed how my kids see me. It's changed everything. And that is the story of an apprenticeship. I mean, it changed my life, and it can change anyone's life at any age. So how we get it out? Well, first of all, has been the schools. You know, we've recently got a much better program in schools to inform. Well, actually, to be honest, I don't know if it's really working on the ground yet, or whether that investment's really flowed through. But we've got a better approach to careers through careers hubs in school, where they get to interact with lots of different businesses and professions and get to know all the different routes. So that's what we've just set up, and that's quite important. Making sure that the people are aware of them is the number 1 importance. Once you go on the site apprenticeships.gov.uk and start to sort of Google what you could do, or search what you could do, you'll be amazed. The other thing is, a lot of people think, and this is in the sector as well, I've found people say it to me regularly in the DFE and people I come into contact with. They're like, well, you know, sometimes apprenticeships are good for those people who are good with their hands. And it's a good job we're on Zoom when they say that, because I think you've got to be kidding. You know, it's just another route sometimes to the same place. You know, I say to people, I've had people from Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, INSEAD, all work for me from my apprenticeship and Liverpool John Moores 1 day a week. You know, this is just a different way to skin a cat. And I think that's the other message we need to make sure that gets out. Degree apprenticeships, I think, are a very important part of the brand image, because now everyone thinks they want to do a degree, and it's a very aspirational thing to do. And if you can do a degree apprenticeship, then that's interesting, because you get a degree, but you're also going to be working at the same time, and you'll get a job for sure, probably from the company that sponsors you. If not, you'll be highly valuable. So I think that's really what we need to focus on. So careers in school, making sure there's enough opportunity, and then obviously making sure people know that they can at any age, at any stage.
Yeah, and those stories are very powerful, aren't they? They're the tools really that can drive those messages. The Andy story, for example. But I was going to ask you actually, you know, apprenticeships, again, often associated with young people, but you've just come up with an example there immediately about somebody who's older person doing apprenticeship, getting the qualifications at a later age. And what I'd suggest, Gillian, is we're going to need more of that, because what we do know,
Yes,
that the pandemic is now displacing lots of people. We are going to see a rise in unemployment. We've already seen one. It's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And so again, you know, these become more important tools for us to be using. And the older people who may be losing their jobs, redundancy, we'll have business owners on this call today, Gillian, who have got people furloughed at the moment. They're keeping everything crossed that by the time we get to January, February, they can retain those staff. But where they can't, is there a particular portal, a particular access point where they could start to send older people to look at the apprenticeship option?
yeah, it's the same one, apprenticeships.gov.uk. And there's even, the other one is the National Careers Service. They can phone up the National Careers Service and they can have a chat as well. So if they just Google that, I do have the number somewhere, but I don't want to give you the wrong number. But I'll give it to you afterwards so you can put it out. So the National Careers Service, give them a call and they'll tell you how to navigate your way through that, particularly if you haven't done that for a long time. But I have about half the apprentices in this country. So there's been nearly 5 million apprentices since trained since 2010, just about 5 million. And it's pretty much half and half, adults and younger people. And I've met, there was a conversation at first which people were saying, would you want to go on an apprenticeship if you were older, you know, would it feel like you were going back to school or whatever? And you know, sometimes they're called different things, but largely I would say, you know, I think apprenticeships are the best thing since sliced bread. In fact, I designed my own to become an MP. I think they're a brilliant model of learning how to get somewhere in life. But there's a lot of people now, a load of adults, and there's some brilliant ones. There's a lot of people who I've met who also, you know, they've always wanted to work in like the health service, to be a nurse or to be a paramedic, or, you know, to actually work in some of those professions, or even in mental health and stuff like that. There is tons of vacancies, and there's 70 different apprenticeship routes into health and social care jobs, all different ones, all levels. And I've met many people now who have, I think because I'm the only apprentice in the village, everywhere I go, they all run after me and say, you know, I've done one. I was in our hospital about a year ago, and a woman ran after me. She was probably in her 40s, early 40s. And she said, oh, I just want to let you know, I've passed my apprenticeship. I said, oh, brilliant. And I said, what were you doing before? She said, I was a domiciliary for 16 years. I said, is that a posh word for a cleaner? She said, kind of, yeah. She said, I've been here working as a domiciliary for 16 years. And she said, and they gave me the opportunity because I'd been working there. And now she's a children's paediatric nurse. You know, now she'll have left school probably with very few qualifications. And I keep trying to get this into everybody's head at the DFE. Just because somebody left school with no qualifications does not mean that they are a level 0 or a level whatever. They are as capable as anyone of getting every qualification that's out there. It's just life didn't turn out that way, and you know, the school experience didn't turn out that way. We all can see how easily that happens, and certainly I can from our school. So but you know, it's that understanding that you know, you can actually use this, and there's so much support in doing it that it's a really great route. If you're not that confident as well, it's a really great route, because there's some brilliant stories out there. 2.5 million adults are now in jobs that they never thought they'd be in through the apprenticeship system.
Let me just go back to the process of this, Gillian. I think this is a problem. You may disagree with me. I actually went to a sixth form college when I left school. I went to school in Skelmersdale, so if you think Highton was tough, again, very unusual for somebody to go into any sort of further education from where I was, but I ended up going to Orrell, actually, to a place called St John Rigby. Fabulous place. But I didn't know that the option at that time for me potentially could have been this apprenticeship route. And there was certainly no signposting of that opportunity from the sixth form. Now that was, I won't tell you how many years ago, but it was a few years ago. And I think the way in which we fund our education now, and historically the way it's been funded, is we will encourage schools to set up sixth forms because financially it can be a lot more lucrative for them. But that can prevent people whose more natural progression will be through an apprenticeship, going to, I declare an interest here, by the way, I'm a governor of the City of Liverpool College. But we often find kids who...
Great college.
Oh, it's the best. You know, look at its results recently, outstanding. But we often find kids come to us maybe a year after they've gone into sixth form. And I just think we need to have a bit more of a mature conversation at that level to say to schools, look, this is about the child. You know, it's not about the financial viability of a school or a profitability or any of that. It's about the individual. And we need to basically provide a bespoke package. And if it's better for that kid to go through a college and through an apprenticeship scheme, let's encourage that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, you know, there's certainly an incentive in the system, which, I mean, I would have thought, I've learned such a lot, actually coming from the private sector, the public sector. The private sector, you know, it's known as being profit, you know, orientated and, you know, kind of ruthless or whatever. Well, it's very honest about what it's doing, the private sector. I've come into the public sector and I've seen the worst behaviour ever. And you honestly think that they would just do the right thing for the person that needs it, do the right thing because, you know, that's kind of what you need now. But sometimes there's these incentives and you think, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You know, we've seen this sometimes with, you know, some of the type of qualifications that people do. You look at the qualifications and think, that's rubbish, you know, it's not going to get anyone anywhere. But, you know, you see that there's a value chain that's developed as a result of it. So I think I was quite surprised at seeing some of the you know, that kind of, I was surprised to think that we had to actually put together a clause to force schools to talk about apprenticeships and other options at all, which was the Baker Clause. We had to put legislation in to force them to do that. That was a surprise, actually. But of course, you know, the financial situation is that, you know, the child attracts the money, and therefore, you know, there is this incentive. You know, obviously, as the Apprenticeships and Skills Minister, I'd very much like to change that, because I just think it's wrong. It's not for the system to be rewarded. It's for the individuals to be rewarded. I think that there's the customers of the whole of our education system is the individual learner and then the business or employer they're going to work for, whether it's the NHS or whether it's Amazon, whoever it is. They are the customers. The customers is the individual learner. The vast majority of people need to work, right, in this country. This idea, you know, I'm working class, very proud working class, but everybody has to work now. We're all working class, really, in terms of, you know, that there's very few people who can afford not to work. So, you know, knowing how to navigate that, and it's not just about money, it's about, you know, having that sort of, well, that personal achievement and you know, being a purpose and loving what you do and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think the system sometimes has gone off a little bit into its own world, and I think it's not helpful to do that. And actually, yeah, it's a kind of perverse incentive.
It's an unintended consequence, and it must be massively difficult to manage and handle. But I just think that sometimes it's about narrative, it's about leadership, and it's about saying to schools in those situations, do the right thing. And I know sometimes that's difficult, but that's a conversation we can continue to have, I'm sure. Certainly it's something that we're conscious of, not just at Liverpool College. Other FEs that I work with across the country have similar challenges, and I think it is something that we need to look at. The other scheme that's come to the fore, one of the Chancellor's initiatives, is Kickstart. And we've just put that out again. We're working with the college actually here, but we're working with colleges in Manchester and Birmingham as well, because of course SMEs were to an extent excluded from the scheme because you had to take on 30 people.
Yeah, to aggregate, yeah.
Yeah, and so we've sort of, you know, it's this idea that the colleges act as the consortium. And the great thing then is, of course, it frees the business from bureaucracy as well. So again, I'd say anyone looking into this, if you're interested in taking on a Kickstarter, come to us and we'll point you in the right direction. Massive uptake for that, Gillian, you'll be pleased to hear. But tell us the thinking behind it.
Well, I mean, obviously it's to try and ensure that young people, usually there's a lot of young people who would leave school at 18 or leave university and then want to get on to, you know, get into a job. And we were obviously concerned that there's so much uncertainty that we wanted to try and make that decision easier for businesses when, you know, there's all this sort of virus chaos going around. So that's obviously what's behind it. So to give those young people an opportunity to get into the workplace and to, you know, I say to young people, this is like a 6-month job interview. Take it as such. You know, this is your chance to get some experience, be able to impress, to be able to get some things on your CV. What we're doing what I'm doing now as well is the first Kickstarters will probably start working around November. So I'm working with the DWP, with the Employment Minister, because what I'd love is for Kickstarter to then turn into an apprenticeship or a traineeship if there's somebody that needs additional help as a pre-apprenticeship before an apprenticeship. But I'm hopeful that we'll be able to try and really sort of tie those things together as well. If there isn't a full-time job opportunity to have, or even, I still think an apprenticeship's a great way because it will then continue the training and continue the progression of young people. So that's the vision. The Kickstart scheme, I think, will be very successful, but I think really the key thing is, when you look at success, is the long-term success. How many people manage to stay employed or manage to move on to an apprenticeship or move on to a different opportunity, having that experience, having been able to prove themselves to move on to a different opportunity. I mean, there are opportunities, even today, you know, in the apprenticeship system, there's 6,900 vacancies. And since the start of the first lockdown, we've had 80,000 vacancies advertised on there. So there are still, you know, and a lot of them have focused on young people as well. So there are still opportunities, and anyone who's looking at, you know, is concerned, it's clearly not been an equal and even economic downturn either. If you're working in health, food, or digital or IT, you're more busy than you were, and the health service can't get enough people. You know, we've got Gatwick Airport not far from here, and the CEO of our mental health trust, you know, the first thing she did was go to Gatwick and say, does anybody want to come and retrain to be working in mental health, because we've got this ambition for parity, but we haven't got all the people trained up yet. So there's huge opportunities because there's loads of skills gaps as well. But of course that means you need to get the skills, and that's the challenge, and that's where Kickstart will help people on that journey if they're young, and apprenticeship schemes help, you know, for any age as well. But that's the objective. If you can't get a full-time job, because obviously those schemes apprenticeship requires, you know, an employer to, we've incentivized them with paying an upfront payment of £2,000 or 1,500 quid if you're over 25. So we've incentivized them, but but still there could be uncertainty, which means that's not enough to make a decision. Then we're also, that's the other part of it, which is really making sure we've got enough skills training that's more flexible than anything we've delivered before. And that's where we're looking at boot camps, and we're looking at different online, offline offers, so that adults can start to retrain to get into some of the areas that perhaps they've always wanted to get into, or they can see there's vacancies in.
Final point from me, and then anybody who has a question want to put that into the chat room, we can have a look at that. Stephen Hesketh from one of our fine hotels, in fact several good hotels in Chester and Liverpool, has put a monologue in there, so I'll get to that in a moment, Stephen. But the final point from me, Gillian, and you will know this well from your days in the world of commerce yourself, we've been talking in this country for years about skills gaps. So, you know, growth companies finding it really difficult to attract the right sort of talent, to recruit the right people. And I often feel as though, you know, there's lots of money being spent in the area of apprenticeship skills and training, but it's not quite matching what we need in terms of our businesses. And I just wonder whether you've had any thoughts as to how we might be able to improve that engagement moving forward. I know some people at a local level are really good at it. Again, I think the FE sector is getting much better now. But just as I say, any thoughts that you may have on that?
Yeah, and this is actually kind of quite a big part of the change that we're going through at the DFE and also in the whole area of FE. So there's been a number of speeches. The Prime Minister's given one, the Secretary of State's given one, which is, you know, we actually, we're falling behind in our technical education, further education. You know, some of the things that people are going off to study are just not matching at all what's required. So part of the skills white paper, which is coming up towards the end of the year, is really looking at how to get much better at this, using FE colleges as a much you know, trying to change the shape of how they operate as well, so that they get much more of a central role in that. It's really key that we have, you know, the visibility is there. It works quite well in some other countries, so we've kind of copied that. And there's a couple of good things we've done. The first of all is with the qualifications. So with all the apprenticeship standards now and T-levels, we've actually worked with employers, leading edge employers, to design those qualifications so that they do have in them, embedded in them, the things that businesses are looking for. And they're not necessarily highly technical things that will change over a period of time. It's the skills and the ability to be able to understand the fast-moving technological environments, to have the basics, to have the understanding, the engineering, or the whatever it is that you're doing. So that is a big part of our focus, and I'm really excited by it because I've worked for much longer than I've been. In fact, I'll never be a politician for as long as I've worked. I don't think I'll live that long. So, you know, and I've worked in loads of different jobs, and I've seen loads of different jobs as well. I've now looked at some of these, and I went to the construction T-level the other day. And my dad worked in construction for all his career, 40 odd years in McAlpines. And, you know, it's amazing. It made me want to go back to school and do this thing. So I think there's been so much learning to improve where we are. So I'm very hopeful about the future. I'm very hopeful about a really good role for FE and for institutes of technology, which are really where FE and HE work together on solving some of these issues as well. And yeah, I honestly believe that we will get to the next generation in how our young people are educated, and we need to, but I am actually I'm very hopeful, and that's more from somebody who's been a business person recruiting thousands of people, you know, tearing my hair out trying to find the skills, because I've always been in kind of leading edge technology. That, yeah, I think it's I think we're going to get there. I'm very excited about what we've got coming forward Now we just need everyone to know about it and everyone to do the thing that most suits them, knowing all the options that they have.
Thanks, Gillian. Do you know, I'm so pleased I said what I said about the City of Liverpool College, because Elaine Bowker's on the call and she's she's principal, so so that's good. Sorry, Elaine, if you want to ask a question, can you just pop it into the chat box, because our technology on a Friday afternoon, and given the fact that the guys in the office have probably had a beer or two by now, might not stand us trying to flip from person to person on the screen, unless Chris Wilcox tells me differently. But the first comments come in from Stephen Hesketh. I don't know if you can see the chat box, Gillian, but he's basically saying here, he's talking about City and Guilds hospitality badges. How do we move on from this, as so much money is still waiters in this zone on apprenticeships? In hospitality, it doesn't work, other than perhaps in the kitchen. So the word apprenticeship levy also adds confusion in the hospitality industry, as wasted money since this introduction of the levy, numbers have gone backwards. So I think what he's saying is there's gaps in provision, and I think you've picked up on some of that during your comments during the course of the conversation. But is there anything specifically around hospitality that you're thinking about at the moment that's being looked at?
Well, the first thing is we are doing, so there's apprenticeships, then there's also the qualifications, full-time qualifications, and then there's the levy. So in terms of the apprenticeships, so all the hospitality apprenticeships now should be moved on to standards, which should be you know, a good standard for the level at which they're at. I mean, clearly some of these are level 2, you know, sort of entry level qualifications. I don't know if, having done that, there are still some that are not, but if there is an issue there, then I'll be very happy to take it up with the Institute, because I'm determined that we will have as good quality as the businesses who are going to employ you need. In terms of full-time qualifications, we are also doing reviews of a lot of the full-time qualifications to make sure they are really still up to date in terms of what businesses need and at the right level. So that's another review, consultation which is started, which is going on now actually till the end of to the end of January. In terms of the levy, so what the levy did is the levy obviously added a levy to large employers that had you know, big pay bills, and I remember my husband worked for Fujitsu at the time, and he was very unhappy when the levy came in, because they had a huge bill which he just saw as a tax on jobs, as many large businesses did. But the other thing that happened when it was first brought in is smaller and medium-sized businesses found it harder to access apprenticeships. So what's happened since then is the levy system now is working much better, and actually we're doing more work to make it work much more easily for SMEs, so that we can get the numbers of SMEs back, because some of the levy money doesn't get spent. And you know, there's this ability to transfer 25%, and most of that doesn't get transferred. Now they're relatively new systems, but what I've said to everyone is we absolutely need to make sure that we lubricate that system. You know, we get this money, we make sure it's there and it's working with the colleges, with the training providers, and it's working for SMEs as well. And I think that's going to be also a vital part of our recovery as well. You know, some large businesses will be reasonably unscathed, some large businesses will be absolutely decimated, you know, depending on the sector they're in, and you know, there'll be a lot of flexibility around with small businesses as well. So we absolutely have to get that working. And you know, I spend quite a lot of my time, because I know exactly what I'm solving for there. It's like, you know, this needs to be easy. It needs to work. We need to have people selling it, which are basically the colleges will go out and sell to businesses. The training providers will go out and sell to businesses. We've made some changes through the pandemic. So there used to be, you know, SMEs could only put 3 reservations on the system. They can now do 10. So, you know, it makes it, you know, a little easier. But yeah, I won't stop until that's as easy as possible. You know, but I do think that plus the incentives hopefully will kick prime that part of the system over the early part of next year when we're going to need it.
Thanks, Gillian. There's a comment here from Debbie Asinda. Only 17% of women are currently in tech. This will be an issue close to your heart, I'm sure, Gillian. A report by PwC said only 3% of young girls see their future in tech. This year we had the lowest number of girls take any form of computer studies at GCSE. Any plans to reverse this? So there's an easy one for you.
I mean, honestly, it's 100%. I don't know how many organisations, I mean, obviously across government, we do all kinds of things to, you know, we've got the coding in schools, we've got the girls coding, we've got all of the women in engineering, we've got so many initiatives. And, you know, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit as well. I've been going around to some of the new T-level students and, you know, there's a digital T-level and 99% of the digital T-level students will be young boys. And then there's the education and childcare, and 99% of the education and childcare students will be young girls. Construction, there's a bit more of a mix now, so which is great to see. And, you know, I do have a female cousin who's a quantity surveyor, and, you know, and she spends a lot of her time trying to get more. You know, I think we have to change the image of these jobs. I think people, because of the career, again, it all comes back to careers and understanding about careers. I think a lot of people have preconceptions about things which are completely out of date. So I don't think there's a job almost that exists now without technology. I can't think of, even if you look at the construction T-level, about a third of it is tech. It's CAD/CAM, it's computer-aided design, it's, you know, everything. Technology has changed the way every business operates. It's changed almost everything that we do. Even in, you know, the health service, there's a big part of what they do that technology is a part of, how they use that technology, etc. And then, of course, you've also got NHS Digital, which is one of the biggest digital employers in the country. So all of these things and the careers, I just think it's a lack of real understanding of the careers and where you'll get to with these particular things. I think it's really depressing because it kind of hasn't moved on in 30 years. Girls still do this, boys still do that. And it's just astonishing. If you go to Taiwan, you'll find, you know, in almost no time, they've completely reversed that. And, you know, they'll have more than half of their maths and computer engineering graduates are girls now.
Fantastic.
So it can be done. It can be done.
Yeah. Work in progress. And I think we got the right person in charge to try and press that agenda forward. Listen, we're getting an explosion of questions and I'm conscious of the time. We are going to do our very best to get Gillian back. We're hoping to do a live event with her at some point when she gets a little less busy. I'm not sure when that will be. But let's go to the question from Liz Smith, because Liz is the principal over at another fine college, Preston's College, who we do a lot of work with as well in Lancashire. So Liz says, great to hear your understanding and appreciation of how people come into FE not having the best learning experience, but flourish through skills development. How can we help influence DFE to appreciate some of the challenges and yet potential of these people, and therefore the flexibilities and funding to support? Again, Gillian, I think you touched upon your own frustrations earlier. You know, this idea that if people come out of school without qualifications, it's almost, that's it, it's done for them. Your attitude, great to hear, very different to that, of course.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, you know, I left school, my best friend left school with one, it was actually a CSE grade 1, so it wasn't even a proper one, really. And now she, you know, she's now got a degree and 2 master's degrees and runs Clatterbridge private cancer clinic hospital in the Wirral, right? And she left with 0. She'd have been a level 0. And so I've seen so many people like that who just have, you know, completely went against the odds actually, and did something in their 20s and 30s, 40s even. So completely. Now in terms of, so, you know, from what I understand, there is extra funding for English and maths, and there's extra funding to help people get their English and maths. One of the things that I've been looking into actually is the success rate of that, because, and I understand it, you know, I think the world divides. I still remember my maths class, the world divided once algebra was opened up, and, you know, there was people who were never going to believe X equals anything unknown. It was not going to happen. And the world just divided there. And, you know, and that was it. And so I can 100% see the challenge, you know, the chance of, you know, trying to get a young guy from our school to want to kill a mockingbird would have not been by reading the book. So, you know, yeah, I can see the challenge, but, you know, we have to help them overcome that challenge, because the reality is every business now you speak to is like, you know, you really do need these basic skills to get on. So I think one of the things I'm quite excited by, which are relatively new, and I don't know whether Preston's part of this actually, or any of the colleges that are on, but it's the Centre for Excellence for Maths, which is a new initiative that's being piloted in a number of places. And I'm hopeful, and then if we can get that right, we can do one for English hopefully as well, but I'm hopeful that that can break the cycle. And what it's doing is looking at whether we can better contextualize and have a more whole college approach to trying to get people over this hurdle, which by this time have become hurdles in their head about maths and English. So I do understand the challenge, but it's sort of one that, you know, I keep saying to college leaders when they say, you know, this is a difficult challenge, I say, you know what, the only reason we're here sat in our jobs is because there's difficult challenges. If there were no difficult challenges, they wouldn't need any of us. They'd all just be off being brilliant, doing whatever they're doing. We are here because there's difficult challenges, and, you know, all we have to do is pick our way through them one by one. And I believe that there's extra funding, that's my understanding. But one thing I do know is I've never been on a single call where there hasn't been a cry for more funding from somebody. That's another thing that's different about this world than the business world. I never heard that in the business world, but that's something that, you know, obviously is, and it's the way it all works. You know, there's a comprehensive spending review, you know, everybody gets their ducks in a row, you know, there's an orchestration around that. But it's a very different thing to see as well. So maths and English, we have to get them through it because it's important for them, and it's important they'll learn more if they have it.
Okay.
It's as simple as that.
Gillian, I'm going to bring the conversation to an end now, only because, as I say, we've taken the allotted hour, and I know you've many other things to be getting on with, hopefully campaigning for a bit more cash through that comprehensive spending review. The one thing I would say about the whole area of education, skills and training, I say this in other areas of policy as well, is I'm not necessarily one of those people who think there's not enough money in the system. I'm just not sure it's spent as efficiently and as effectively as maybe it could be. And there are areas I think we've touched upon today that have maybe highlighted one or two of those areas. It's been great to see you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah.
And it's great that somebody from Chichester hasn't required an interpreter for the interview today.
I do in Chichester. I get very excited when I find a fellow Scouser in Chichester. There's a couple. By the way, I'm very happy. Mark Butchard, who arranged this, who organised it, has spent a long time delivering leaflets when he didn't have to, helping me when I was absolutely no one and going absolutely nowhere, helping me to try and get somewhere. So I am completely indebted to him. So I normally do what he asked me to do. So I'm very happy to come back and do another session. And also when we can move around, I need to see my parents anyway, but when we can move around, I'd love to come and see, you know, come and visit some of the colleges as well, up in the Northwest, because I am a regular visitor to the Northwest. So it's very, very easy for me to arrange to do so. And also, you know, any of the universities doing degree apprenticeships as well.
Fantastic. Well, we'd love to get you into Liverpool and to Preston's College, I'm sure. And we look forward to seeing you in the flesh. Thanks very much, Gillian. It's been great.
Thank you so much.
And I'm sure people have been absolutely delighted to find a government minister with hands-on experience for the thing they're responsible for. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks, Gillian. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us.